Hello again. We're going to go ahead and get started with this video today. This is the third video of a four-part series. Today's video is going to be just a walk around my Gatton CNC to take a look at some of the enhancements and modifications that I've made to it. Some of them are very simple, just personalization of the machine itself, and some are, relatively significant in nature. The next video and the final video in this series, we're going to take a look at the differences and do a comparative analysis between both the Gatton CNC and over here my shoestring CNC. A lot of similarities, but there are some differences. I think we can call them out as we walk around, and it'll be an interesting video. These last two videos, they're really going to be a lot of fun to make. I've got I've got a list here of about, 10 enhancements that I've made. We're going to talk about everything from the clamping system that I use to the way that I have the top configured, all the way to the back of the machine, and that's where it's really going to get interesting. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into this. I'm going to zoom the camera in on some of these key areas that we're going to focus on, and you can see how I've got this set up. Thanks. Well, the first thing I wanted to show you was my little clamping system. I have a MDF board here on the top of my CNC. I have holes drilled every 6 inches. 6x6 matrix here with the holes drilled. On the bottom of the MDF, there are these little 1/4x20 T-nuts, and then I have a number of pieces of this 1/4x20 threaded rod that actually goes into that T-nut from the top. And I have these homemade clamps here. These are just made out of, I believe I had some extra poplar, and for some reason I'm have an overabundance of poplar lately, but I made these out of poplar with a design that I got off the internet. It is a two-part clamp. It has the clamp itself. It has a little groove down the center that gives it some latitude to space it with. I have a little cutout of a wheel here with another 1/4x20 T-nut in it, and what you do is you just set up the configuration. Move this out of the way. Set the configuration up like this. The way that those clamps are configured, you can use it as a push clamp or a friction clamp, and then apply friction to your piece. If you're just cutting let's say a design into the top of a board or something, you can also use this sort of as I had another piece of wood here. There we go. You can put another piece of similarly dimensioned wood off to the side, and then you can use that as a pressure clamp from the top as well. And so that's a couple of these makes it pretty stable. Sometimes you'll be using a piece of sacrificial wood under your clamp, and in this case, let me move the camera over here. If you're using a piece of a sacrificial wood underneath a 3/4 inch piece of plywood or whatever, I would just use a 2x4 for pressure on the other side and just apply straight down pressure. And again, very low profile clamps, very low profile. I like those because I've run into a couple high profile clamps, as I'm sure we all have. But the low profile clamp, and also it's wood, so if I do run into it, it's not going to tear up my bit or my machinery. The bit will just go right through the wood, and then I'll just have to make another clamp. So that's my clamping system. That's my configuration of the top of my CNC. So the way that I have the top of my table set up, I've cut a piece of MDF, and that MDF is exactly the cut length and width that I'm able to get with my configuration or my setup here on the CNC. It's generally 48 inches long and about 39 inches wide. So there are several reasons why I configure that MDF to not go all the way to the rails. The first reason is I can take a look at that MDF and I've got a real good visual of what my cut space is. There's no question in my mind how far my machine can go left to right or front and back. That is the area that I can cut. If I need to cut the entire width, then I can configure other clamps that will hold down the material on top. But right now I've got that 6x6 grid across the entire 48 by 39. So I can get anywhere on that. I can get anywhere on that cutting space very easily with my clamps. I'm going to move the camera just a little bit. Pardon the wobble. But what you'll see right there, what that also does is it gives me a workspace down both sides of my CNC. You'll see there on the right hand side I've got some clamps, I've got some wrenches, I got a router bit, I got screwdrivers, and the fact that I've got that right there on my CNC, I don't have to set something down off to my back or my right or my left and then go looking for it later on. I can keep it right there on the CNC without having to worry about whether or not my router bit is going to hit it. So it gives me a workspace down both the left and the right side that's very, very convenient and allows me to store some tools there. As long as moving over to the right hand side of the router table here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but what I have is a real nice narrow cut at a perfect right angle that comes down the width of my CNC, and then it goes down the entire length of my CNC. And what that's for is I can align my router bit right here and then move the gantry, move the router all the way over to the other side, all the way over here. And as long as that router bit stays in the center of that line the entire way across, then I know I've got perfect square. If it's a little bit out of square, for one reason or another, it's been bumped or missed a step here or there, whatever, I can tell very quickly before I start a project that it's out of square, and just turn the motors off, turn the lead screw on either the x-axis or on the a-axis, get it back in alignment very quickly, and then go ahead and start. Okay, as we all know, dust is a problem, so you need to have some form of dust collection. I wanted to get this this dust shoe here from Gatton CNC. I've had my eye on that for, gosh, over a year. It's a beautiful dust shoe, very well put together, and it really does the job. It handles that 4-inch hose very well, and really keeps the dust off the work table and out of the way. Also, let me move this focus just a tad here, the other way. Okay. Also, if you can see right here, I've got a aluminum router mount. Right here, I got that from CNC Router Parts. The reason why I got that was twofold. Number one, my dream is to someday wind up with a CNC Router Parts CNC, and so I've got the mount that will fit it. But also, what that does, it has a different spacing than what the plywood router mount has, and it gives me the space that I can put this, well, you can't really see it now, but it has enough space under there to hook up that dust collector. So those are two enhancements I've got on this particular side. Now on the other side of what I call my Hydra, where I have my second Z-axis and my second router, I do use the wooden one over there because I have no need for dust collection, or dust collection would not be a viable option when I'm doing those types of projects on the other side. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you recognize this little gizmo right here. This is a 1/4-20 screw along with a dowel nut. Every place in the router that called for a screw and a nut, I replaced the nut with that dowel nut. The reason being that to me it was just a little bit more handy. I had a bunch lying around from my first build with the shoestring CNC. So and also I kind of trust these just a little bit more than the regular quarter 20 nut. So every place that I have in my router where I have a nut and a screw, that's the type of configuration that I have. For me, it just makes things a little bit more simple. Now, what I had to do was I had to cut my parts so that this type of mechanical fastener would actually work there. Now, I was very fortunate when Dave Gatton first offered his Gatton CNC up for sale. He offered two separate packages. One package was with the parts and one package was without the parts but just the plans. And I think that was an offer for about 6 weeks or so. But I jumped on it right at the very beginning and I got the plans, so I was able to cut my own pieces. So when I did, I modified my pieces and made them just a little bit longer so that they would handle those dowel nuts. And I'll show you a picture. Here's a picture of what I'm talking about with that dowel nut there on the right hand side. It caused me some grief at first, and then what I had to do was just go ahead and recut those pieces and make them just a little bit longer so that I had the space to put those dowel nuts in. Here's an awesome little router bit that I picked up from Tools Today, I believe. It's a surfacing bit. I think the bit is about 2.5, maybe 2 3/4 inches. I forgot exactly what it is, but it has 4 cutters on it, and once those cutters, those are kind of used, but once those cutters are used, you can unscrew them and turn them around. You get 4 cuts on each one of those cutters. But that right there is a tremendous surfacing tool. I've used that to surface the top of this table. I used it to surface the fixture that I have on the back of the table, and I'll tell you what, with a 2.5 or 3 inch, whatever it is, cut width, it'll go across your table in no time, and it sure takes a laborious and mundane task and makes it go pretty quick. So I love that little router bit. So here's another little addition that's worth its weight in gold. I'll try to keep this in focus. What this is just a knob that goes on the end of my NEMA motors. It really comes in handy when turning the lead screws. It has a little nut in it, a little screw in it right here that allows it to be affixed to the top of the NEMA motor, somewhat similar to this. Okay, here that knob is on top of my motor on my Z-axis. It's very easy to turn the Z-axis up and down when you're doing your zero process. I also use it on my Y-axis, which is a little bit easier to get to than just grabbing a hold of the lead screw. On the shoestring budget CNC, you had a lot of grab on that Z-axis. You have none on this one right here, so you definitely need that knob to turn the motor. One more thing that I've done talking about turning motors, let me move the camera again. I've made some plywood spacers so that I can space that NEMA motor out from the gantry upright. The reason why I did that was because in order to get to those nuts on the coupler, you have to have that spacing and that open area. If you don't, then the upright itself will prevent you from making adjustments on those couplers, and you do need to tighten those up from time to time, or at least I do. So you definitely want to have access to those screws on those couplers. So I've put some spacers right there. I probably could have used 3. I only put 2 in. I may put in another one, but the one thing to remember is that every time you put in a spacer, you take up 3/4 of an inch of length of your lead screw. So if you haven't compensated for that, your lead screw will come out of the other upright as you're putting in those spacers. So be aware of that. Now here is the back of my CNC gantry, and you can see that this was the original back plate that rode on the back, and I took that off and I fiddled with it for a while, and then I went ahead and just cut a actually a mirror copy of the plate that I had, the front plate that I had on the front. And then I went ahead and built another box, and I built the router mount, put another router in there. It's working pretty good right now. I'm making some dovetails with it with a fixture that I have. I'll show you that in just a minute, but I think for those of you who've seen my dovetail video, you've already seen that fixture, so I won't spend much time with that. Okay, this is my fixture for my dovetail joints. This is just a left side fixture. There will be eventually a mirror copy of this over on the right side, so I can cut 2 joints at a time. This horizontal fence right here is used, has a dual purpose. Number one, you can use it to put stock back here to keep from getting tear out when you're cutting your vertical piece right here against the vertical fence. Another thing you can do if you're doing half blind dovetails, you can actually put the stock here and the stock here and cut them both at the same time. Now you do have to have an offset that the software will actually figure out for you, but that's the reason why I have these little slots, if you can see those, cut into these fences so that I can adjust those fences left and right for that particular offset. One thing else you'll probably notice there is a lathe. That is the main reason why I went ahead and put this back Z-axis on my CNC. That's a mini lathe right now. I think I got that from Rockler. Very highly recommended, very well reviewed. I didn't have any problem putting out I don't think it was $300. In the front of it, I've got an extension that will extend the bed another 22 inches because Lord knows anything you get's not going to be big enough unless you buy another part. And then what will happen is I will build a stand for that lathe and raise it up somewhat. And that lathe is right now, let me step in front of the camera here. That lathe right now shows about 7 inches on center from the edge of the CNC machine. Now I've got 7 1/4 inches that I can move my gantry back behind or my router back behind my CNC. And also, I don't really have that lathe pushed as far as I can towards the back of the CNC because those other fixtures are there right now, and I can remove those and get another 2 or 3 inches. So I'm going to have plenty of room for that lathe. The only thing I'm going to have to figure out is the gearing mechanism. I'll have to get another, well, I've got plenty of NEMA 23s, but I'll get another NEMA 23 and I'll hook it up to that. I may run that on a 1-to-1 gear ratio. I'll have to configure something to do that. I don't know. I've got a lot of work to do on that. I am excited about having the space and the overhang to actually work on that lathe and do the dovetails as well. So I'm anxious to maybe in another 2 or 3 months or whatever it takes me, depending upon the workload at work, real work, then I may get that configured. These next 3 pictures here to kind of wrap things up real quick. The first picture just shows how I've doubled up the plywood on my uprights. As I said before, I made my own parts, so it was pretty easy for me just to glue a couple pieces of plywood together. I didn't have a bit that had a 1.5 inch or greater cut length on it that was sufficient. I did have a 1/2 inch bit, but the diameter of that bit prevented me from making the sharp inside curves that I needed to execute here to make the uprights proper. So what I did, I just used a 1/4 inch bit. I cut down about, I don't know, an inch or so, and then I took a jigsaw and hand cut the uprights out of the wood, and then just used a flush trim bit on the router table and trimmed it up. It came out pretty good, and I'm not recommending that anyone use double width uprights. I'm just saying it worked for me. It added some mass. It adds, I guess, some stability. And if I were to do it again, I'd do it again, but not recommending it. The second picture here, just real quick, it shows a drawer that I made. I put my CNC on top of 2 kitchen cabinets that I got at Home Depot or Lowe's, wherever. I got a good deal on them. They were on sale, and then I got a discount as well. So I put casters on the bottom, rolled them together. They're sink cabinets, so I think they were about 6 feet long or so. They had fake drawers on the front, so I pried off the fake drawer front, put in some runners, and put in some drawers. And that drawer right there is once I get my wire management completed, and you see I need some wire management, but once I get the wire management completed, I'll go ahead and put my computer on there and my control box as well. And then this last picture just shows that when I was building the machine, I did not extend that the gantry 3/4 of an inch, or the width of a piece of wood, out past that the upright. I thought I was doing a smart thing. I thought, well, geez, if I compress that gantry down 3/4 of an inch, then I'll have that much more cutting space on the front of my CNC, and I did. But when I decided then to go with the configuration of a new of a new Z axis and a new router, another router on the back, I kind of cut myself short on that 3/4 of an inch too. So kind of a win-lose situation there, but I did what I did, and that's what this picture shows. Well, that wraps things up. I hope that you all enjoyed this particular video of some enhancements and modifications that I made to my Gatton CNC. And again, I'm looking forward to making the next video that will be the comparative analysis between the shoestring budget CNC and the Gatton CNC. So I'll see you then. Bye.